Welcome to the First Church of Christ Scientist Woodstock. Thank you all for coming. Many thanks to the Woodstock Center for Awakening for organizing this town-wide spiritual festival and for inviting us to hold an event at our church. So, when the world situation is presenting injustice, corruption, and violence, our response is often fear, anger, or ridicule. As these emotions are expressed, they tend to make the situation worse, increasing discord and polarizing instead of harmonizing. So we have invited representatives of several local congregations to speak about how their faith traditions can help us think about responding spiritually to political crisis. There is one more. There's a Tibetan monk who hopefully is on his way, but I'm out of touch with him, so we're going to start without him. In 1908, Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, started what became an international newspaper, the Christian Science Monitor, partly in reaction to the sensationalist journalism of that time. And the Monitor is still publishing daily online and a weekly magazine. And it focuses its news coverage on facts, principles, and ideas instead of personalities and emotions, which is meant to give readers the ability to make their own judgments about current events. It also helps us focus our prayers for the world by showing the errors of perception that need correcting. The Monitor recently reported on the 100th anniversary of the high-profile Scopes trial that challenged a law passed in Tennessee dictating that evolution could not be taught in public schools. They had to teach creationism, the Bible's version of creation. Media coverage at the time ridiculed the rural customs of the Tennessee town where the trial was held, as well as the fundamentalist beliefs of the residents. The result was alienation of the fundamentalist Christians from mainstream America. When the movement bounced back in the 1950s, it was well organized, strategic, and highly politicized. The Monitor traces this development largely to the public ridicule that inspired the fundamentalists to redefine themselves as evangelicals. And as you know, they are now a powerful influence on courts and policy decisions in the Trump administration. So I just want to illustrate the effect of ridicule on the people that we're not so much in favor of. It doesn't work very well. So we're going to begin with the Reverend Matthew Wright of St. Gregory's Episcopal Church. That's that beautiful A-frame down on Route 212. Each of us will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll open up. If you have questions or want to make comments from the audience, you're welcome to do that. And we are recording this, the Zoom session, so people will be able to watch somehow online. Okay. I know.
I'm gonna grab this. Let's just begin by centering ourselves a little bit, taking a moment to bring our awareness to our breath. So much of the polarization in our culture happens in our mental space. We get tangled in mental knots. Just to come into a non-discursive space, allow our awareness to settle into our heart space, into the rise and fall of our breathing. I invite you to join in this simple chant as you feel moved. The words are changeless, calm, deep mystery, ever more deeply rooted in thee. Changeless and calm, deep mystery, ever more deeply rooted in thee. Changeless and calm, deep mystery, ever more deeply rooted in thee. Changeless and calm, deep mystery, ever so deeply rooted in thee. Once more. Changeless and calm, deep mystery, ever more deeply rooted in thee. Just resting for another breath in that deep mystery, which we're all woven together as one. Once you're ready, you can open your eyes if you close them. So I'm very happy to be a part of this conversation. Thank you, Violet, for calling us together. And I thought I would explore a little bit what Christian teaching or Jesus teaching has to say, perhaps about the moment of polarization and cultural and political impasse we seem to be at. And first, just to affirm that the Jewish and Christian and Islamic scriptural witness from the Hebrew prophets to Jesus, the teachings are all about the cultivation of compassion and the cultivation of justice. Economic justice for all, the forgiveness of debts, the leveling of the social order so that inequity is not the way we structure our life together. And the simple teaching from Torah that Jesus reiterates of seeing the foreigner and seeing your neighbor as yourself. And I think this is such a profound teaching. It doesn't say love your neighbor as much as yourself, but love your neighbor as yourself. What is it for us to see each person, each being as an extension of our own self, that we're all participating in one life? It reminds me of a saint being asked the question, how should we treat others? And responding, there are no others. There are no others. And seeing this way, Jesus' pet term for this was the metaphor of the kingdom of God. It's the world seen through the eyes of unity, when we don't see from separation. And it's his favorite metaphor. It's what he's always talking about. He says the kingdom of God is like this, and the kingdom of God is like that. And he's really juxtaposing this image with the kingdoms of this world, the kingdoms of empire, the kingdom of Rome, in our day and age, the American capitalist kingdom. He's saying there are these kingdoms of this world that run on exploitation, that run on hierarchy, that run on domination and power over. And he envisions the kingdom of God that runs on power with, that runs on inclusion, and that runs on love. It's a totally different vision that turns the world upside down. And the metaphor, he plays with it in all these wonderful, wild ways. And there are a couple different times in scripture when people ask him, when will this kingdom come? When's the world going to be turned upside down? And there's a moment in Luke's gospel where we're told that he was asked when the kingdom of God was coming. And he responded, the kingdom of God is not coming with things that can be observed or seen simply with your eye. Nor will they say, look, here it is or there it is. For in fact, the kingdom of God is within you. that it begins from this deep rooting and that deep mystery that we were chanting about, and rooting ourselves in that divine unity, that place where we go deep enough and it's the same depth in each one of us. There's another exchange in the Gospel of Thomas where they ask the same question, and he responds again, we won't say the kingdom is here or it's there, rather the kingdom is spread out on the face of the earth and people fail to see it. It's already here, it's all around us, it's spread on the face of the earth and it's present in our own depths. We fail to see it because we're looking with the wrong eyes. We're looking with the eyes of separation, with our calculating eyes, rather than the eye of unity, the eye of the heart. And movements like the one Jesus sparked, which was really a Jewish renewal movement, he wasn't attempting to found a new religion, they're always both necessarily spiritual and political movements. And I mean political in the best sense of the word, that our politics are how we organize our life together. How do we organize community? And importantly though, a movement like the one he started first starts with the transformation of the person from the inside out. How do I start transforming myself from the inside out? As I increase my own personal coherence and integrity, that increases social coherence and integrity. And something ripples from the inside out. So it's not imposed externally, it comes from an inner transformation. And it's exactly the opposite that the structures of secular empire try to do. They want to impose order from the outside, right? And this vision is about an order that emerges from within. And in the early Jesus movement, they had this slogan that I think gets really abused today, Jesus is Lord, which was actually a counter-imperial slogan. They were countering the statement of the empire, Caesar is Lord. This was Caesar's motto, Caesar is Lord. And Caesar brought peace through power over violence and domination. And so for these early Jesus people to say, no, Jesus is Lord, was to say, no, true lordship looks like servanthood, looks like love, looks like humility. And so it was an inversion. But then around the 4th century, Christianity merges with empire, becomes the official state religion, and suddenly the subversion in the statement, Jesus is Lord, is lost. And now it starts to mean something like Jesus is Caesar.
Right.
And we're still dealing with that, the fallout of that merging of a spiritual tradition with imperial force. And they just cancel each other out. The Jesus teaching runs on surrender, humility, and love. Empire runs on domination, power, and control. And you try to put them together and, one is going to lose out. And we see the fallout of that merger in American theocratic capitalist Christianity today. It's the fallout of that confusion, that attempt to merge these two things that really can't be brought together. And the church today, the Christian community, is faced with what we can easily call a heresy known as white Christian nationalism that's plaguing the United States. And one of our bishops of New York, Episcopal Bishop of New York, Alan Shin, he just this past year headed up the House of Bishops Theology Committee, and they wrote a book called The Crisis of Christian Nationalism. And they state, without hesitation, that Christian nationalism is a sin, that it is not Christian, but has rather, quote, appropriated a thin veneer of Christian identity, and that it is in actuality a white supremacist national ideology that uses Christian language as its justification.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
who issued this?
This is the House of Bishops of the Episcopal Church. And this was headed by one of our bishops in New York. And then they conclude, thus it is fundamentally an apostasy that violates the first and the second of the 10 commandments, which are the commandments against idolatry and placing other gods before God. But again, what Jesus calls the kingdom of God, this vision of divine unity, it can't be imposed through force. It can only arise through open hearts, right? And so I think this comes back to the polarization in our culture. We have to be aware of the subtle violence and othering and division within our own hearts. Are we moving through the world with divided hearts? And I shared with my congregation a while back that I've in recent years become increasingly suspicious of a kind of subtle violence in flags, bumper stickers, and lawn signs. And the way we use them for a kind of self-righteous virtue signaling to show that I'm on the right team and I'm not like those people. And I think we have to ask whenever we use signage like that, what's my real intention? Am I trying to let someone know I stand in solidarity with them and this is a safe place? Or am I trying to say, I'm not like you dumb, idiotic, science-denying bigots? I'm staking my sign. Which again, as Violet was saying, can create a sense of othering and ridiculing. Someone else feels put down and ridiculed by what we're proudly claiming. And so I'm curious about how we can de-escalate the subtle division within our hearts culturally. And again, my real concern isn't like the lawn signs, but what's going on unconsciously in ourselves that might be fueling division. Because the best thing we can do that will actually bring healing to the world is to move as more whole beings ourselves. How do we come into a greater integrity within ourselves? Our best hope for healing a divided world is never an angry war with the divided, which we've now joined. Now we're divided as well, but a transformation of ourselves into a deeper wholeness. And so I think the real gift we have to bring in this political moment is first and foremost our quality of presence. What is the quality of presence I bring into any moment? It's really the only gift I can bring. And if I am fragmented and angry and divided, then I'm only furthering fragmentation, anger, and division in the world. If I can come into the moment whole, with peace, with an open heart, then I'm bringing that into the moment. And open hearts have a tendency to help open other hearts, whereas angry, fragmented hearts tend to make other hearts contract and shut down. So I think like the healing has to start at home. How do we bring ourselves back into wholeness? And then let that move out from ourselves into the world. I don't know if it's been 10 minutes yet. So I think we'll just stop there and then we'll keep bouncing around together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring it back. So I'd like to introduce Rabbi Karen Levine from the Woodstock Jewish Congregation.
Thank you so much, Violet, for including me, inviting me. It's really an honor to be here with all of you today. I'd like to start also with a chant. That's, well, the word mantra is not particularly a Jewish word, doesn't. But one thing I do love, and I think that's the appreciation that we're here today, is the synergy that happens when wisdom traditions get to communicate with one another. And this is a little line from the Psalms, from Psalm 89. Olam Chesed Yibaneh. And this psalm has been a friend of mine the last couple years. I don't know if anybody here knows what happened on October 7th, 2023 in Israel. Mm-hmm. And so as a Jew and a Jewish leader, this event has had an enormous impact on my life, and of course that's written down. And so this psalm has been a daily companion of mine in these couple of years now, as a way to bring something new into a situation. So olam means world, and it means eternity. Chesed is unconditional love, loving kindness. And Yibaneh is to build. So to build a world from loving kindness.
Yibaneh.
Yibaneh. Yibaneh.
Yibaneh.
To build.
Yibaneh.
And when I contemplate eternity, I grew up on Long Island on the South Shore on Beach Drive. So I grew up very close to the ocean. And so for me, my favorite place to contemplate eternity is the beach, is the ocean, is that threshold of land and sea, the surf. So. I will build this world from love, the light and the light, and you will build this world from love, the light and the light, and when we build this world from love, So in still the spirit of interdenominational sharing, there's actually a quote from the Talmud that says, "Who is wise? One who learns from every person." So in the words of the great Ursula Le Guin, and this is something, it was in the Freeman. Many years ago, the Kingston Freeman had a quote of the day. And I clipped this out. It's been on my refrigerator for maybe 25 years. To oppose something is to maintain it. To oppose something is to maintain it. And Carl Jung has a variation on that, which says, what you resist persists. What you resist persists. So in answer, the spiritual response to political crisis, to me, yes, it's important to go out and protest. It's important to show up, to write letters, because people who are making decisions on our behalf have to know what's in our hearts. But it's also important to then, if we're going to do that, to show up from a place, as Reverend Matthew was talking about, what's happening inside. So again, as a rabbi, what we do often is we go to the Torah. The Torah is our ancient spiritual wisdom book. And it's not a book, I mean, it's now can be printed in a book with covers and bindings and pages. But in its original form that still persists to this day, it's handwritten on a scroll. And in the course of our year, we read the entire scroll. That the Jewish calendar is very much in sync with the sun, the spheres of the sun and the moon, the sphere of the earth, and the circles of the cycles. Our months are lunar months of the revolution of the moon going around the earth, and our years are solar years of the sun that goes around, the earth that goes around the sun. And so as we position ourselves in the cycle of the year, we also read our holy book in that cycle. And that scroll can be opened up. And once we've moved through the scroll, we actually open it up and create a big circle of that scroll so that when we get to the end, we roll it back to the beginning. And so there's this perpetual cycle of reading the scripture that goes back 2,500, 3,000 years, a long time. And so we land ourselves in this moment in that tradition. And so from this week's Torah portion, well, really last week was what we read in synagogue yesterday, is one of the quintessential prayers that you say that's been woven into our liturgy. It's the first words that come out of our mouths when we wake up in the morning, the last words when we go to sleep at night, and the last words that come from our lips at the end of our lives as we're leaving this form. Shema Yisrael, Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, Eloheinu, Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, Echad. What does this mean? Shema, listen. But not just listen with your ears. Concentrate. Strive to understand. Hear the small voice that's there all the time, that sometimes the noise of life blocks out. Get quiet. Listen. Yisrael. As Rabbi Matthew was also talking about, sometimes, the conflation of a nation state with a prophet, with a religion. So Yisrael is the name that was given to Jacob, a character in the Torah, in the book of Genesis. Jacob is returning to his homeland. He's alone in the desert. He's anxious about meeting up with his brother, who he hasn't seen in a long, long time. And an angel, a man, a being shows up and wrestles with him all night. And at the end of that wrestling, Jacob is still whole. And as that angel or that being flees at the break of sunlight, Jacob says, "What is your name?" And the angel says, "Well, you have wrestled with an angel and have prevailed, and wrestled with God and prevailed, and you will have a new name, and that is Yisrael." So what Yisrael means is one who wrestles, one who confronts really hard things, who doesn't shy away from it, stays with it, and wrestles with it. Yud-Heh Vav-Heh is the unpronounceable name of God in the Torah. Sometimes we could pronounce it as Yah, as the breath. In Jewish tradition, God is not a noun. God is a verb. God is, I am becoming what I am becoming. I am life unfolding. So listen, you wrestlers. Life is unfolding here and now. And the final word, echad, is oneness. So when we think about our spiritual responses, we have to remember that all is one. I love this. God is love, chesed, where we started, and God is oneness. And so if we could take that time, that quiet, to listen to eternity, we can experience that oneness. And through that, we've nourished ourselves, and we can bring that value to stay out of the, it's either this or that, the bifurcation, the here's something here, I am against that. And bring something new. If we're only against something, we're reinforcing it. So our spiritual approach, let's bring something new. Something that hasn't existed before into the reality. And that's where the true change. So I'll just finish with a quote from Rabbi Tarfon in the Talmud. It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. So let's all stay engaged and with love. Thank you.
All right, now we have Swami Jnaneswariananda of Sivananda Ashram. Practice saying that.
Very
Beautiful
well.
name. Please, do you want the,
I'm actually gonna ask if I can pull the chair forward.
go right ahead.
We teach this across like, it's different to teaching standing up. My brain works different. You go. Thank you. Sorry. And I want to thank Violet for having me, inviting me here, and also Matthew and Karen for some beautiful talks. And what always amazes me when I give a presentation or I'm in a forum like this is that how similar our teachings are. And I had a little outline in my head I was going to talk about. We have to come from a place of love. We have to come from a place of unity. And so I'm tossing out a lot of what I was going to talk about because they've expressed it so well. But talk a little bit about how yoga approaches finding love and finding unity. So I'm from a tradition that's called the Vedanta, and there's many different philosophies, orthodox philosophies coming out of the Hindu tradition. Our yoga, which is a mystical form of Hinduism, that form of Hinduism that says that you can experience God, the presence of God. That's the purpose of the practices. In fact, that's the purpose of our life, is to have that experience. But where is God? Easier to answer where God isn't. God is in everything. There's no such thing as inanimate matter. Right? Everything is an expression of God. Every experience we have is an expression of God. But we don't often experience that. And our teachings say that we are, at essence, the divine. That same, we call it Brahman. It's sort of the unnameable. Sometimes it's just called that. Because as soon as we give it any description, it's not that anymore. Okay? And we often put name and form onto that, absolute. That name and form we put on becomes, we call it Ishvara, but when we think of God as Jesus, or God as Krishna, or God as Shiva, or in any other form, underneath all these names and forms is that same one absolute essence. That is pure love, the essence of pure existence, the essence of pure consciousness, pure awareness. And everything we experience in this world is a reflection. When we experience our individual consciousness, we're experiencing a reflection of that absolute. Like you look in a mirror and go, oh, that's what I look like. I know who I am. And I know who this person is because I've seen them in my mirror. But the problem is the mirror is distorting. We have to polish the mirror. That's the practice. It's a spiritual practice. And we find the same spiritual practices across the board. They always come down to this idea of thinning the ego. Serve. Serve others. Just serve with pure love, unconditional. Learn to think of others and their suffering and how I can help relieve it, whether it be something small or a larger suffering. What can I do in my capacity where I am at this moment? How can I help that person? Whether it just be somebody next to me that needs me to hold the door open for them, or is there something I can do on a larger scale? The idea of learning to love unconditionally. To keep practicing that. To keep tapping the source of love. Because if my true nature is the divine, my true nature is love. My true nature is bliss. You may have heard the word, my name has Ananda at the end. All the Swamis, our name is Ananda. That means absolute bliss. To remind us that this is my true nature. This is my true name. Why? You're Ananda, you're absolute bliss. But you don't experience it 24/7, right? Why not? That mind, that ego, that mind, the judgment, the fear, the anger, what we call the instinctual nature that we have. It keeps us locked in that. And it's very loud. Fear is very loud. The true self is soft, quiet. In fact, we find it in silence. That's why we practice meditation. And meditation doesn't have to be terribly formal, but just taking time to be quiet. Be quiet, be still, listen. And ask the questions. This is the philosophical part. Ask the questions. Who am I really? Because until I can answer that question, I can't see the real problem. As long as I'm walking around mistaking who I am, I'm not seeing who other people are. I'm not seeing the real problem. I see the problem through my ego, through my fear, through my anger. And I can't find a solution. And so often the solution becomes, as Violet said, I love that talk about the beginning of Christian nationalism. Right? We see people through the wrong emotions and the wrong eyes. Our senses and our mind, your mind can be your very best friend, and it can be our worst enemy. Because it will, we believe it. I have a thought, it's the most important thing ever. I get out my phone and I tell everybody, I just had a thought. So what yoga says we have to do, we have to have courage. We have to have the courage to face our most toughest enemy, and that is our own mind. The habits of mind that we've created, the habits of mind that we've attached to, those habits of mind that tell us I am a separate individual and that I should be worried about my space, or maybe I include my family, or maybe I include my community, maybe I include my country. I include people that agree with me, that have the right yard sign. Oh, they're my people, I'm going to support them. This is the instinctual, the lower part of our nature, the instinctual nature that we have. And what yoga says, we have to use our intellect to examine that, to undo the negativities. The beautiful part about yoga is it says that you can see the bad habits you have. I can see that I'm impatient, or I can see that I tend to get angry when people say certain things, or I get angry at certain parts of the news, whatever it is. I can see that and I can change that. That is the beauty. We can change that. We can analyze what our mind is telling us and we can turn it around. And when we keep doing that, when we get out of the fear, we hear that more quiet voice. Sometimes we think of it as the intuition, right? The intuition that instead of saying, you know, that I should have something because I should take something from someone else because I don't have it and it's dangerous that someone else has something I don't have. I can hear the intuition that says what? Better to give than to receive. Right? That is not instinctual nature. That is not our nature, to our lower nature. But our higher nature says that. But we have to consciously watch our lower nature and constantly lift ourselves out of that. Rather than reacting with emotion, we have to respond with love. And of course, this idea of finding peace in the world. Everybody, Karen took my statement, I think it was you, that we can't impose peace. We can't impose on others. We have to find peace within ourselves. This is the battle. This is the constant struggle. And when we do that, we discover something. We discover I am whole and complete as I am. I am whole and complete as I am. I don't need to react to what's happening in the world. Doesn't mean I don't respond. No, I don't react with emotion. I can clearly see how I can help. I can clearly see my place in the world. I can clearly see how I can benefit others in the best possible way. But I have to find that peace. I have to find that contentment. I have to find that tranquility in myself. I have to be at peace being me and not requiring the world to make me whole, not requiring others to make me whole. I have to believe that I am whole and complete. And now as a whole and complete being, I can go out and help others find that. How? By just helping them, serving them. So our Satguru, Swami Sivananda, who's the International Sivananda Yoga Vedanta Centers, we're an international organization or international movement. We do have an ashram in Woodburn. But our Satguru, Swami Sivananda, since everyone else sang a song, I'm going to sing this song. He was famous, he was a saint in India in the first half of the 20th century. He left his body in 1963. But he was very famous and often ridiculed because he would write these songs in English. And so we take these very complex teachings of yoga and he would put them in very simple ways. Right? So I'm going to sing a little bit. Serve, love, give, purify, meditate, realize. Be good, do good, be kind, be compassionate. Adapt, adjust, accommodate. Bear injury, bear insult, highest sadhana. Bear insult, bear injury, highest yoga. Inquire, who am I? Know thyself and be free. Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat, Om Tat Sat, Om. Om Shanti, Om Peace, Om Shalom. See how simple it is? That's the beauty. We just have to remember these simple things. He also taught that life is always a struggle, but remember that the struggle is with my own mind. If I'm not responding with love, I have to struggle with my own mind. Don't fight the others. Fight that, because once I overcome my own mind and I can respond with love, then I can do anything. I can go anywhere. Our teacher, Swami Vishnudevananda, who was the disciple of Swami Sivananda, founded this organization. He would go into war zones. He flew an ultralight airplane over the Berlin Wall into the East Berlin. To do what? To show that we can't have these borders. He would flew from Tel Aviv to Cairo during the war with Egypt, between Israel and Egypt, flew over the Suez Canal and was dropping marigold flowers. And the only reason he could do these things is because he did not take sides. He didn't think one person was a bad person, one person was a right person. All he saw was everybody was suffering. And our job is to help remove that. So this is my, my spiritual principles. I would add: serve, love, give, purify your mind, meditate, be still, be silent sometimes. And realize your true nature, realize that absolute self within, that absolute love. And if you want to find love, the way we experience love, we think we get it from other people or other things. We experience love when it's coming from the inside out. You want to love? You want love? Love. That's it. And just one more mantra to end. And the meaning of this one is, may all beings in the world find happiness and peace. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. 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 Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Namah Shivaya. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Sivananda. Very nice. And okay, I'm going to close with, this is all written out, and there's going to be a bit of redundancy because we all have similar
Truth is one,
But
sage is
right?
followed by many.
Similar truths. In Christian Science, we understand everyone's true nature as derived from spirit, which by definition is entirely and infinitely good. The Bible says we are made in the image and likeness of God. So we express the qualities of God without any taint of evil. On the other hand, we tend to identify ourselves with what Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, calls mortal mind, which has been referred to as the ego. It's an amalgamation of images imposed by society, our past experiences, and hopes from the future, but ultimately it's not a real thing. But we think it's who we really are. It's based on lack. Mortal mind never has enough, and it's always criticizing us for not having more. It's the source of fear and hatred, but it's not our true identity. When we peel away the false negative beliefs imposed by mortal mind, we discover our true nature, which is based on truth and love. Sometimes that nature expresses itself spontaneously when we're thankful for someone's kindness, or when we appreciate the beauty of burning leaves and elevating clouds. At other times, we have to cultivate our awareness of our spiritual nature through spiritual practice, which often means correcting negative thoughts, whether they're about ourselves or other people. When we hate people we perceive as enemies because they're expressing injustice or violence, we have to remind ourselves that while we may condemn their actions, their true nature as people remains the same as our true nature, based on love and truth. And that nature ultimately prevails. Evil, which has no basis in infinite spirit, eventually destroys itself. So changing our thinking can seem like a weak response to what looks like an evil power. But if this thinking is based on deep-seated spiritual principle, it has more power than we might recognize. I will give an example, not from politics, but from a personal experience of Wright. A woman who regularly attends our church was at a Wednesday evening service in a Christian Science church in New York City. The reader who leads the service was reading from the Bible and our textbook, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. A young man walked in, stood in front of the congregation with his hands in his pockets, said he had a gun, and declared that if people didn't hand over their valuables, he would start shooting. Of course, it's possible that the man did not actually have a gun, but the practical advice in such situations is to err on the side of caution and follow orders. In this case, the people in the pews, instead of reaching for their wallets, instantly turned their thought to seeing the divine, loving, innocent nature of this young man, contradicting the appearance he was displaying of threat and violence. The reader calmly told him she was reading from holy books and invited him to sit down and listen. The man stood there for a moment, then lowered his head and walked out of the church. Later, the police arrived and reported that a man had robbed several local stores that evening using similar threats. A small example, but imagine what might happen if all of us, instead of being mesmerized by the flamboyant personalities of political figures, instead of giving in to rage and fear, which tend to inflame and encourage their negative actions, as we've heard, what if daily we focused our attention instead on the innately innocent truth of their essential being, their love of justice, their honesty, their wisdom, their understanding of how to use power for the good of all their sisters and brothers. The level of consciousness required to see our supposed enemies in this light is a consciousness that can guide how we behave, rippling out into the world. We can't predict or outline how our prayerful thoughts will influence politicians. But we know that while we must speak against injustice and corruption, the way we do it and the way we think about it has an effect on society. We have to practice these ideas in our personal lives as well. When we come into conflict with someone in our family or at work, especially someone we can't just walk away from, we have to see them as expressions of God, no matter how strongly we disagree with them or feel mistreated by them. We have to find our way to understanding that they are innocent, merciful, and pure by definition. Or we do harm to ourselves by harboring self-righteous and judgmental feelings. It's difficult to get to this place without simply repressing our emotions. It takes prayer or meditation and consecrated thought. But because we and they are both expressions of the one divine mind, we all have the capacity to go beyond resentment and anger, to recognize the underlying harmony that is the truth of being. In divine mind, there is no we and they. Regardless of appearances, in our personal experience and in politics, we all have the ability to perceive each other as holy and beloved. And I'll close with an example from this January's Christian Science Sentinel, it's a weekly magazine on spiritual topics. A teenager wrote about meeting an exchange student from Gaza. When she thought of the girl's family still living in a war zone, she felt fearful and worried. But she knew from what she'd learned in Christian Science Sunday School that dwelling on fear was not helpful. She prayed to know God as love, that divine love is everywhere for everyone, supporting this girl's family. She recognized that God is principled, governing everyone and everything, even when it seems like human government is wreaking havoc. She thought about the concept of home, which is more than a place, but includes qualities of safety and comfort, which are expressions of divine mind. For a week, she spent time praying about these understandings, especially when she heard people talking about the danger in Gaza. Then the news came the student's family had been given the chance to leave Gaza, which was very difficult to do. The family was free and safe. So I don't know, did this girl's prayer release her acquaintance's family? I don't know. I can't prove that it did. I can't prove that it didn't. But I read this to you to give you an example of how we can use our thinking to look at what's happening in the world in a way that's not limited to anger and hate and fear. And I think it's a good thing. So, if anyone has questions that they want to ask any of us or all of us, or just comments, please speak up.
I'm curious, from all of this, it seems like each of you touched on it in a way, but like, what is the reason for fear and hate and anger? Does it seem like each of you touched on those things and love being the opposite? So what's the reason for those things that we need the opposite?
That's a really good question. I don't know.
I think it.
So I wouldn't say that love is the opposite. I think in our philosophy, love is your nature. Okay. Fear and anger are emotions. An opposite could be compassion, maybe a better word, courage, maybe a better word for the opposite of them. Why they are there is because, in a sense, my background is also biology and things, so I kind of combine the two. This idea we have the brain and we have the mind, and we have this you need the alert system, and the alert system generates a thought, and this thought can be fear, it can be anger. It's actually basically kind of the same thing. We interpret it as different things, but it's our alert system. Be aware, and it causes a physiological response, so we pay much more attention to it. The problem is that we identify with it. And so I say, like, we have a thought, and we go, oh, this is very important. And so I have a thought of fear, and it's like, oh, I'm afraid. Instead of, oh, I'm experiencing fear. Why am I experiencing fear? It could be because a cat knocked over the garbage can and it made a loud noise. Or it could be, I'm standing on a train track and there's a train coming, oh, the train's coming. I should take action. But the problem is, as I said before, we react rather than respond. And so we have these emotions and we react, we grab onto them, we hold them, and we don't let go of them. And then what we have to do is learn how to not suppress it, but to see it, recognize it coming up. Think, oh, I'm being able to detach enough that just because I had a thought does not mean it's important. And to be able to let it go. And eventually we can learn to train the mind that instead of having the fear reaction, we have a different type of fear. Instead of hatred, maybe, or anger, maybe I have compassion for somebody. But that takes a lot of practice, but that's what I meant by this is the struggle, this is the fight. I have to be able to recognize this is not a helpful emotion. If I can quote Groucho Marx, he said this, if you speak in anger, you'll give the greatest speech you'll ever regret. And so just to recognize that these are not useful emotions. They alert us, but we should just take the alert and then respond rather than. And as we practice that again, the love gets uncovered. That is your true nature. Love, bliss, joy, peace, that is our true nature, that is hidden under all these emotions that we attach to and we identify with.
Thank you, great answer. Michael, did you have a thought?
Well, yeah, no, I was actually I think that our instincts and anger and fear and all that served us very well as old human beings when we were in a very dangerous neighborhood. And I think those shadows are still there, but they don't serve us in the same way. So taking that distance from them, realizing they just don't serve us.
I would say it has to do with where we stake our seat or our center of selfhood. And in practice, we can stake our sense of selfhood and our emotions. We can stake it in our thoughts. Oh, I am these thoughts. I am this narrative in my head. Oh, I am these feelings coursing through my body. And in spiritual practice, we can learn to stake our center of selfhood in just pure presence. Oh, I'm just this pure heartful presence that precedes names, labels, identities, any fixed referent, and we can know ourselves there. And then we can move back into the more limited aspects of our being with a degree of freedom. But if we stake our selfhood in those things, well, those are a threat. If my identity is in my possessions, well, if someone takes my possessions, I'm losing my identity. If my identity is in my roles, then I lose my job, I lost my identity. And so when we stake our center of selfhood in the shallow end of our being, then we live in fear because those things are passing. They can be taken away, and I have to protect them now. I have to defend that sense of selfhood with tooth and claw. I have to, but if we stake it in that deeper sense of presence, there's nothing to defend. And I feel, I sometimes think of what we discover in our heart as we move into the heart, know ourselves as that. There's a kind of vulnerable invulnerability that it's totally vulnerable because it's just open. But it's also invulnerable because when you punch a fist into open space, there's nothing to hit, and we can know ourselves there. And as you were saying, we're biological organisms that have evolved on this planet, and we're also souls that are incarnating in physical biological organisms for experiences, for these experiences and learning. And if we can come to know ourselves as soul, there's nothing really to be afraid of, right? But if I know myself only as my body, there's a lot to be afraid of. And those fear responses have helped us survive as biological organisms, helped us, but yeah, we don't have to be driven solely by that. We can know ourselves as something much more than that. And yeah, and as you're saying, fear is reactive. And in practice, we can learn to consciously choose rather than react. Often we're just automatons. We're just reacting from fear. And as we slow down, we move into our center. Oh, okay, there's the fear response. And I don't have to take the bait. Let me analyze the situation. Oh, see, it's just the cat knocked over the trash can and everything's okay. Or it's the train coming in and you can move. And now I'm consciously acting rather than unconsciously reacting.
Beautiful, but
Yes, I think there's another aspect of this, it's probably just said maybe in a different way, which is that the ego identifies with mortality. And so if there's mortality, It has to continuously self-preserve because it always feels like it's under threat, so it's going to be afraid of everything. But when we're in touch with our divine nature, we realize that's immortal. And so that fear, that ego body dissolves. And so just to continue with a question, an inquiry, love the conversation, and it's so important in today's world, right? And I'm so familiar with Vedanta, been studying the teachings of Vedanta for a very long time, teachings of Christianity. What was new that I heard today was the definition of Israel, Israel, and the wrestling. And I feel like that's really, you know, at the heart of our conversations here is like, how do we wrestle? When we have all of this going on, we have the knowledge and we have the wisdom and we have the awareness, yet how do we wrestle with this ego that we're living in? And through our ego bodies, how do we do that? And remembering, so it kind of circles right back to that remembering. Now, where I tend to go and struggle the most maybe is I can remember, and does that affect change on the outer world? Am I going to be able to affect any level of change by doing so? And maybe in a very quantum physics type of a way, perhaps. In my way, yeah, but I'm not here to just serve my ego. And so I keep, you know, I'm going to circle back to the community. I can preserve my peace, but now I want to affect change. I want to learn how to wrestle, and I want to be wrestled with. You know, let's do this. Let's do it. And with the goal of landing gently in that love. So thanks for all the conversation.
I think this is where practice really comes in,
Yeah.
right? That, you know, just like anything else, you know, our muscles need practice to do things and have reflexes. We have habits. And so I think that's what these traditions really offer us, are practices that go with it and stay with it. Then we've developed these reflexes that can bring the love out first before we bring the self-protection, holding on to things. You know, if we're living in a mind of scarcity, then we're protecting it. And so we practice that.
That's what I was thinking, is like, well, that's why we have different traditions, because different practices appeal to different people. Some people want to meditate, some people want to pray, which is slightly different. Some people want to study words. You know, we have a lot of study aid in Christian Science, and but yeah, it's something that you got to do every day, and as much of the time as you can manage to practice looking at the world in this way that is not what we originally were taught to do, but it's our true nature. We go down far enough.
So if we're all created in the image of God, but someone Elohim, that's a good practice.
Yeah.
Is to connect with each person that we meet first, understanding that we are all created in the image of God. And so love is there.
Yeah, I found myself thinking about Arjuna field of battle. And the strong desire or temptation to not engage in that battle. And I think, you know, we are divine beings and we are physical bodies. But thirdly, we're all members of communities. And the battle on Arjuna, that was two different communities. Well, it was a civil war too. But, and so much of the grief in the world is because those who believe in peace, love, and justice tend to shun, you know, we kind of want to shun the battle, and those who don't believe in those things, they're right there in the battle, punching way above their weight in numbers. And that's going on today. How do we confront the field of political battle?
So I'm going to comment on this because he's talking about the Bhagavad Gita, the great battle of the Mahabharata, the discourse between Krishna and Arjuna. Arjuna leading his family into a war against another family, but they are cousins and they were actually raised in the same household. And he laments this battle that's about to happen. Our Krishna, representing the divine influence, is his chariot drivers, driving his mind, controlling his senses and driving his mind. And he has to be taken out to the middle of the battlefield. And he looks, so he can see both armies, and he's looking at his family and he's looking at his cousins on the other side, who have been acting in very wrong ways, have been, what we call agonic, not in a righteous way. And his duty of fighting this war is to restore righteousness, to restore order to the kingdom. And he doesn't want to go into the fight. He doesn't want to go into the battle because he's looking at it and he's saying, look at, no matter what we do, but no matter what the outcome, it's going to be a loss. I'm going to go into this battle, and if I lose, my family's going to be destroyed, and they're going to still be rulers. If I win, our families are going to be destroyed, and I'll be the ruler. But who wants that? And so he basically says, I'm throwing down my weapons. I don't want to fight. Now, the first time you read the Bhagavad Gita, you think like, oh, this is all about love and peace. Right? And what does Krishna say? Krishna doesn't say, oh, you're speaking very wisely. He says, like, why are you being such a wimp? Stand up. Go out and fight. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Right? And number one, it shocks you. You're like, what? And then, but we reach that point where we have to ask that question, what am I supposed to do here? I don't see a right answer. But everything I'm using in my mind, all of that education I had, all of that personality I developed is not helping me here. What do I do? And he says, like, okay, now I'm going to be your disciple. So first of all, we have to have that humility. We have to come down and just say, I can't solve all of the problems with my logic or with my learning or my emotions. What's been working before, what I think has been working before hasn't been working, and I have to find another way. So first of all, we have to have that humility. And then the first lesson that Krishna teaches him, because he even says, it's like, you're speaking very wisely for a man. And you're talking about your great teachers and you're grieving for them, but you shouldn't grieve for them because they are divine beings, as are you. And if your problem is that you're looking at the problems of the world, looking at this battle at the ground level. So I always joke about it's like I've just stuck my head out of the hole. And all I see is feet and cars coming at me. And my life is about just not getting stepped on. And Krishna takes him by the scruff of the neck and pulls him up. And says, these are divine. This is the divine play. Look at it from this vantage point. And all of a sudden the world looks different. This is the teaching. We have to stop looking at the world from, again, our instinctual nature, our fear of losing something, and from our ego viewpoint, and look at it from the divine viewpoint. And the more we practice, the more we keep reminding ourselves, I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, I'm not these emotions, I am bliss absolute, I am love absolute. We lift ourselves up and we see the world differently. All of a sudden there's opportunity, all of a sudden we see choices, we see paths that we can't see when we're at the lower levels of it. This is the practice. That's what, again, all the spiritual practices are about, is like raising ourselves up and seeing it. And that's the idea of serving. Do what is right. Don't worry about what other people are going to say. Don't worry about the result. If it's the right thing to do, do it. Bravery. Go in and do it. And again, the great battle. Battle in our own mind. The Lord, it's like the devil and the angel on the shoulder. We just gotta keep choosing the angel.
Gandhi struggled with this because of his teachings on ahimsa and on violence and how to read the Gita. And there are different approaches. And one he tried to take was to make Kurukshetra, to make it build a battle internal. And that this is the inner battle with the lower self that we can't avoid. We have to engage that battle. But his feeling was that choosing a course of violence, while maybe at points in human history was a necessity in our unfolding, that we've reached a stage today where we've seen that violence is never an ultimate solution. It may be a temporary fix. Okay, what are we gonna do? There's an oppressor, this needs to be stopped. And violence is a temporary solution, but violence always creates wounds that enter the next generation that are going to be worked out in a way that may also bring more violence. And so his feeling was that at some point, we have to break the cycle of violence. And in the Christian path, Jesus is the model of, rather than responding with violence, just absorbing violence, saying, okay, and speaking forgiveness and absorbing violence as a way of breaking the cycle rather than continuing it. So that was Gandhi's solution to this conundrum. Like, you know, Krishna says, go fight. He said, yes, go fight the battle within. And I think that's an act of discernment as we move through the world. Are there situations that may call for actual physical violence? And I think most oppressed peoples would say yes. There are times where we need to rise up and stop this. But I think we have to be aware that that's part of a larger world process, and that will never be an ultimate solution because the wounds eventually have to be healed in a deeper way.
Can I just make one comment on that? Because that is the allegory that we use for this battle. Whereas this Kurukshetra, or this field of action, is the, we say the mind or the heart. But I also like to remind people that he didn't say that I was supposed to go out and fight, or that you were supposed to go out and fight. He said Arjuna's duty was to fight. Everybody has their duty in life, and one of our main duties is to find your duty in life. What is my place in the world? How do I participate in a society? What is my space? And my space is not to go into that, into a war. But that's also kind of in that teaching as well. So don't take it so literally that we're all supposed to go out and fight, but definitely that we cannot avoid that battle. And the family, it's like I have those thoughts and things that are very close to me. I have those teachers that I have to, sometimes I have to say no, they taught me to a certain extent, now I have to let them go. And I have the enemies in my mind that I have to destroy. But again, always going into the battle, not worrying about the results. And that sounds strange, but just do the best you can, do what is right. Because we can't see everything, we can't predict everything. So when you see a correct action, and your heart says this is a correct action, take.
I'm
But how we place it,
I'm talking about the specific political battle.
Yeah.
Like 80% of Americans want single payer health care.
Yeah.
And why don't we have the political power to make that happen? It's because most people don't vote, don't organize, don't unionize, don't do all those things, and therefore the 1%, the 0.1% captures wins the war. And I'm not talking about going into any war. Well, politics is a war. How do you go into that war and not wound and maim people?
Not lose your soul in the
Not
process.
lose your soul, but let's win a few.
Affect change.
Yeah.
Or the way Krishna was able to talk Arjuna into doing the right thing. How can we put Krishna on the other side, the wrong side, and have them go through the change? Because the change has to happen from within. And the world we live in, the example of Gandhi and Mahabharata and Arjuna, those were the wars, right? We go through this daily struggle with day-to-day interactions with our neighbors, with our co-workers, right? I have personally accepted this framework as way of my life, and I'm pretty calm and collected about it, and I look at them with a lot of love and compassion, and not the sympathy that you are not there. I used to not say anything some time ago. Now I ask them a question like a therapist and find them, have them find their own answers. is there any other framework you guys have about living in this polarized world with other people where our values and our principles don't match?
I guess that's the same. So, you're familiar with Bhakti Yoga, and there's the practices of Bhakti Yoga. This is the devotional practice. Right? So we listen to the stories of God. Right? We repeat the name of God. There's a list of these things, and we can take these instead of applying them to God, apply them to individuals we meet. So, listen. Just listen to what they're saying without judgment. Just try to listen. Try to respect them. Find respect within yourself for that person, even if you completely disagree with their viewpoints.
Say nothing.
You can just get into discourse, but you can do it respectfully and with love.
Try and understand how they got to that viewpoint
Yeah, just have compassion.
by listening and, through empathy. And, then you can be on the same plane at least so that there is a possibility for dialogue and change.
But just that's, I try to make it more simple because we can get our heads wrapped up. We like to use our intellect too much sometimes. We're just like, can I listen to this person? Because what we actually make connection is when we go even beyond the intellect. It's an intuitive thing. We have that experience. We see them very clearly. But as long as if we're engaging the intellect too much, we don't see so clearly. Because again, we're feeding stuff into the intellect machine, and our emotions can get in there. A lot of our preconceived ideas get in there. But just try to clear the mind and listen, respect, love, engage in a dialogue with them. But it doesn't have to be a political dialogue, but just be kind, be compassionate. And it changes people. That's how we can, because a lot of times what they're missing is love, compassion, somebody to listen to them. Why are there so many angry people in this book? Because they don't feel listened to. They don't feel like anybody cares about them. And they find other people that are angry and feel the same way, and then they just reinforce that this is what the world is like. So we have to provide the example that no, there is love, there is compassion.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and then we're gonna wrap up this one.
So thank you all for, shedding light upon, this topic for all of us. When it was spoken, we need to do something new. That spoke to me because I feel like we're looking for something new. Everyone's looking for something new. And the question is like, is it gonna come from within, or are we gonna see it? Is it gonna be something to be observed? Like, are we going to turn on our TVs and see the announcement that world peace has arrived?
Or turn off our TV.
So like, to do something new, like, the idea of being holy is being separate, like come out from among them and be separate. In the mainstream news, we're just hearing like problems and problems, enemies, it's like these truths which humanity has these truths, like we have inherited these truths. Why don't we hear these truths in our media? We don't hear them because the mainstream is like, it's like we need to come out of that and be separate and start a new stream. Like we need to basically disconnect from that circus. And it's like to build up something within ourselves that's stronger so that when we face the world, we are not overwhelmed by it. But really, because we need to cooperate. But I feel like if we're cooperating in the mainstream, we're just like getting ourselves dirty. We really need to like almost despise that. The news, everything that's just basically seems to be So all that I'm trying to say is I feel that we have so much wealth, like what was spoken today. We have this, and this is something that most of us don't hear throughout the day. Why not? If we're reminded of these things, then, you know, I think that we can really unite, you know, based on those truths, you know.
Christian Science Monitor is a really
Yeah.
good alternative.
Really,
I don't know, you have to take a look, there's, Angela had her hand up for us, so.
Alex.
Alex, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. This has been a wonderful meeting, and I have felt extremely alone in my quest for a non-violent approach to our times and to just existing in the world. And so I really appreciate that you've all come forth and that this has been arranged and that there are other people thinking like myself. I don't feel so alone. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to the Center for Awakening, which is, Michael was here.
Can I address, go ahead, can I address, what was your name, I'm sorry,
Alex.
Alex.
2 hours.
No,
No, you're,
this is Espan.
That's fine.
Oh,
No, I'm S-Fun.
Okay, so I just wanted to address that for a moment, because, you asked like, why, we're not hearing it in the media, we're not, how can we, you know, be exposed to this? And one of the tenets of yoga is the Swadhyaya study. You should read something every day. Read the Bible every day, or the Torah every day, or something inspiring every day. That's basically we have to be reminded, because we will forget. And we can be very inspired, it's like, oh, I'm the absolute Brahman, and we stub our toe and we're sore toe. You know, so we have to, so just, you know, we have to search for it, we have to read it. And
You're absolutely right. I don't wanna say too much. Just when that's a personal endeavor, but when it comes to, like, when we come together to do something, like, how do we recognize that truth? How do we allow it to grow and become a part of us and become a part of our community?
bring
You know,
it
so
into
that's the.
have
there.
meeting.
Talk about
As we find people that we resonate with and create community, that exactly that as you're saying, we can't solve the problems or create the new thing within the parameters of the framework that created the problem. And that's often what we're doing. We're in the parameters of the framework that is generating the problem, trying to fix the problem inside of it. The problem can't be solved because those parameters are creating the problem. And so how do we step out of that? And often we spend so much of our energy trying to tear down the old thing rather than putting energy into building the new thing.
Correct.
So like, how do we energize the new possibility, the new story, and start living it in community? And then it gains momentum and it grows. And that can require some degree of unplugging from narratives or frameworks or media that aren't serving a new thing. And I think for each of us, it's an individual discernment of where am I called to stand? And there are people who are going to be called to stand within existing systems and structures that to some degree are part of the problem, but change needs to happen there, you know, and they can affect change that can actually help people's lives. And then some people are going to unplug from those systems and create new things altogether. And so it's an individual discernment of where can I best serve, where can I stand, and where are the people who are standing there with me, you know, and then it unfolds. And if it can unfold from our lack of practice and study and you know.
Thank you all so much for being here. All right, take care.
Good to see you, Kevin.
When you started,